Borderline with Samara Weaving as a pop star named Sophia. Borderline. Paul is a stalker played by Ray Nicholson. Borderline, an alleged horror comedy from the writer of Babysitter Killer Queen and Cocaine Bear, without any of the wit of either of those films. I couldn't wait for this film to end. I couldn't wait for this film to end with its stretched out gags and comedy that didn't hit. Borderline was written and directed by Jimmy Warden. Warden with a Warden is really what we ought to call him by now. Yes, he wrote Babysitter Killer Queen. Oh, she's a killer queen. That sequel that was quite unnecessary. Okay, I'm done with the musical stuff, except I'm not. He also wrote Cocaine Bear, Samara Weaving. Yes, from Ready or Not, Here I Come. You Can't Hide. Hide, hide, hide. They're going to do a sequel to this. I don't know how, but they're going to do a sequel to this. Apparently, Catherine Newton's going to be in it. Watch Ready or Not, by the way. It mixes horror and comedy a whole lot better than Borderline. Now, I didn't think the Borderline looked all that great, but I thought it looked all right. It's, I guess, a dark comedy with some horror elements. I don't know what this film is actually supposed to be. Maybe a social commentary on stalkers? Except the problem is, Ray Nicholson, who's a terrific actor, by the way, and also played Paul in Smile 2. I'm starting to think maybe he should just make a run playing characters named Paul, because Paul is not Paul anymore. He's Super Paul. Sophia, played by the very talented and very, very insanely attractive Samara Weaving, who really deserves to be in better projects. I mean, she was in Azrael that wasn't all that good. She's stalked by Paul, and there's also her bodyguard. If you be her bodyguard, she'll be your long-lost pal, dude, as long as she pays for you. Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. I said I was done doing the musical, except I lied. Eric Dane is a good character actor, and Jimmy Fails. Fails is an appropriate word to apply to this movie because, oh boy, and that's not his fault. He plays Rhodes. No, not Ramblin' Lisbeth Rose. If you get it, you get it. And also, Paul has a partner in crime, Penny Alba Baptista, who was in Amelia's Children, a film that I did not like at all. It wasn't good. Check out my review. If you've seen Amelia's Children, you can check out my review of that if you want. She's a very bright-eyed woman. She's also very French, and you probably shouldn't have people try to do much of a language if they aren't able to hide a little bit of... I know that's going to sound mean because everybody has to break out into different markets. Some can just do fine in their home country. And she's certainly trying, but it's like the Catherine Zeta-Jones thing when she tried to do an American accent in The Haunting. It didn't work. But nevertheless, basically, this is an attempt at social commentary mixed with some horror elements and some comedy elements that hit a couple times. And then they rarely hit. And gags are stretched the fuck out. It's available on Amazon for about, $7 or $8. I paid it because even if I end up not liking the movie, I am not going to pirate a movie. I'm going to do what I can to support the filmmakers. Also, this is the only place it was available. I decided to forego watching the Alto Nights in theaters and decided to stay home on one of my days off watching a bunch of movies on streaming because why the fuck not? What do you want from me? I need to provide more content. Not good, bad comedy, bad horror, all around. 3, 2, 1, spoilers. So, basically set in the 1990s, we get some contemporary music such as No More I Love Yous by Annie Lennox. I actually didn't mind the opening where Paul was basically completely insane and ends up stabbing Eric Dane. That was an unintentional rhyme because I got the time. I will say that Ray Nicholson does a good job as this character. He's clearly having a blast, but they don't allow Samara Weaving to flex her acting muscles. She has nice legs, though. I did notice that, in those shorts. Nevertheless, the No More I Love Yous part was fine. I don't know why there's this trope with a lot of horror movies going 10 minutes in before we get to the credits. Now, sometimes it works. Like, it's worked with other, slashers and stuff like that, but it didn't work here. So, there is a player named Devontae Rose, an NBA player, played by Jimmy. And I think this has a little bit of a mix of a player that was actually stalked in the 1990s. If I remember right, they just don't really lean into that and do a very good job of trying to balance that shit. And that's the thing. This movie's unbalanced. It doesn't know what it wants to be. The comedy really does not hit. Love Fool by the Cardigans, they must have paid handsomely for the rights for that because, well, that's pretty much their only hit besides, I think, Foolish Game. If you don't know what Love Fool by the Cardigans is, I don't know what to tell you. If this was set in 1995, however, Love Fool didn't come out till 1996. It was most famously used on the Romeo and Juliet soundtrack and in the Romeo and Juliet movie where Leonardo DiCaprio, Claire Danes, and Baz Luhrmann decided we're just going to go nuts. Why was Matthew Lillard in that? Was it Matthew Lillard or Jamie Kennedy? Kennedy. So these tangents are actually a lot more interesting than this movie because it bounces back and forth explaining this plan. Bell has a daughter and a wife that end up getting kidnapped. The daughter wants him to get out of this particular line of work. There's a character named J.H. that's there. That's Penny and Paul's confidant, shall we say. Well, more like Paul's confidant. They make him a slow character. I'm not saying the actor is, but they make the character slow, like he's simple-minded. And there's a shot of a list of guys, I guess, that Sophia has slept with. Rhodes is on it. He's debating whether this relationship is real. None of this stuff is really fully dived into, by the way. It's just a mishmash and doesn't understand what genre or even what tone it wants to have. And I don't mind mixing horror and comedy, because I believe, as Jordan Peele said, really the only difference between horror and comedy is the music. And he's not wrong. He's not, I mean, in some senses he is, but he's not entirely wrong. So, yeah, doesn't know what to do with this stuff. The power goes out at the place. There's a side thing with a cop that is trying to break into Hollywood or Broadway or whatever and does a song and dance number and gets killed on the street by J.H. because he's a cop that's, like, patrolling out there. Belle arrives. It turns out that, during this interim that basically the daughter explains apparently Sophia's girlfriend collapsed, right? The mother or the daughter explains this. I actually forget which one because this movie's so unremarkable. I'm remembering certain plot elements. There's not much of a plot. The bottom line is Paul's girlfriend apparently collapsed and died at one of Sophia's concerts, probably triggering why she feels this, or why he feels this way, and why he's just completely nuts. And even pretended early on that Belle was Sophia. Really, Ray Nicholson is about the only shining example of understanding the assignment and being in a completely different movie, by the way. So then basically Penny ends up killing a guard. There's like a few flashes where she seems to be having a little bit of fun. So during this point where Paul is in the house saying all this stuff up, there's a trunk with a priest in it. That gag sounds a lot funnier than it actually plays out. And Rhodes ends up getting knocked out by Sophia accidentally when she thinks that he's one of the stalkers. Penny starts playing Celine Dion's It's All Coming Back to Me Now on the piano, and they do a song rendition that if the movie had leaned into more fun like that, I would have been okay with it. The problem is well before this, the movie lost me. And then they get a fight where basically Penny shoves her through a window. They're going to have a point where she's going to set her on fire, but then Sophia turns the table, but Sophia doesn't set people on fire. But then she gets Penny in the little recording booth and sets her on fire. I will say Samara Weaving actually can sing, and Alba can sing. She might want to start picking that as a career if she can't do better acting. Apparently, she is married to Chris Evans. Chris Evans was born the same year I was. Alba was born in 1997. Whatever, it's fine. I'm not going to judge much. 16-year age difference, but there we go. So a little bit earlier, by the way, when Belle's family got kidnapped by J.H., somehow that, human waterbed snuck up on everybody. And I'm talking as a character. I'm not talking as the person. But snuck into the vehicle, and nobody noticed the leaning, and the bending of the axles. That being said, he ends up shooting Bell in the back of the head, except he didn't shoot him in the back of the head because he has poor aim. There's also a very helium-based assistant named Kaylor. I just assume that's her name, or that's her actual voice, or she's just putting that on. But nevertheless, she ends up finding Bell. We see like a little bit of her in the beginning when Bell gets introduced, and all this stuff is really tonally messy. Bell takes the car. Bell's Eric Dane's character, by the way. And now the wedding is going to be set up. And basically the idea is Paul is so far gone that he sees Rhodes and thinks that Rhodes is Sophia. So Rhodes is in the wedding dress. And the idea is basically he's going to kill Sophia because his girlfriend died. He's totally snapped, all this stuff. And I'm making this sound more interesting than it actually is. And this ends in a wedding scene that really should have been a whole lot funnier than it was. J.H. gets kind of briefly drowned in the goddamn, holy water. But then he ends up taking the girl hostage because he's not dead. Rose gets stabbed, but he's not dead because he's in the wedding dress. And Paul is knocked out. Gets back up just in time to basically get arrested because Samara Weaving witnesses Rhodes basically slash J.H.'s neck. So the daughter's saved, and Paul is being taken away in the cop car, but still thinks that he's married to Sophia because he's totally far gone. And Belle decides to go find another line of work. And again, I make this sound a lot more interesting than it actually is because this really isn't. I kind of almost hated it because I hated the wasted potential. And it's a shame, too. I'm not saying I expected this to be landmark filmmaking or even great filmmaking, but I expected it to at least try. And I didn't know what it wanted to be. So, F. So, agree, disagree what I said. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Rittland, and I'll see you soon.